He rode home after 25 years and found a stranger's family living on his land. The gate was still there. That was the first thing I noticed. Same cedar posts, same iron crossbar, different chain, heavier than the one my father put up, newer, with a padlock that hadn't been there before. But the posts were the same, and the land behind them was the same, or close enough to the same that my chest went tight the moment I pulled the roan to a stop and just looked. I hadn't meant to stop. I'd been telling myself since Kansas City that I'd ride straight in, deal with whatever had to be dealt with, and not feel a damned thing about it. That lasted about 4 seconds. You spend 25 years not going home, and you think you've let go. You think you've left it behind so completely that it can't do anything to you anymore. Then you see the gate with the different chain, and the poplar your father planted along the drive when you were 9, and those trees are tall now, and you realize you haven't let go of anything at all. You just put it down and stepped away from it, and the second you come back it's lying exactly where you left it, still carrying the same weight. I sat there in the cold for a while. October, early frost, the kind of morning where the air has a bite to it but the sun's still trying to be warm, and the two of them argue with each other and neither wins. My name is Cal Dunmore. The land behind that gate is 312 acres on the Clearwater Flats, western Wyoming, and it belonged to my father before it belonged to me, and it belonged to his father before that. Amos Dunmore broke it out of hard ground in 1848 with a mule and a prayer that probably embarrassed him later. He wasn't a religious man. Neither was my father. Neither am I, which I always figured ran in the blood like the set of a jaw, or a tendency to hold things too long before letting them go. I was 22 when I left. Not by choice. That's the part that's hard to say, even now, even to myself, even after all the distance I've covered since then. I'll get to that. What I need you to understand first is what I was riding back to, or thought I was riding back to. I had papers. A deed, recorded at the county seat in 1891, in my father's name, transferred to mine at his death in 1897. The kind of papers that mean something in a court of law. The kind of papers I'd been carrying around in the inside breast pocket of every coat I'd owned for 25 years, folded and refolded until the creases were soft as cloth. I'd made a good life. That's not nothing. Took me a while to understand that, but it's true. I spent years doing things I'm not going to pretend I'm proud of. Hired work, some of it ugly, the kind where you collect your money and don't think too hard about what it meant. I was good at it. I had a steadiness with a gun that some men are born with and can't explain, like being good with horses or being able to read weather. I didn't earn it. It was just there. And a man with that kind of steadiness, who needs to eat, doesn't always get to be careful about who he works for. But I got older. Things change when you get older if you're paying any attention at all. You start thinking about what it all adds up to. You start thinking about land and your name on a deed, and a place that was supposed to be yours. You start waking up in strange beds in strange towns and thinking about poplar trees and the way frost sits on a specific field you remember, and you know you're finished pretending you've left it behind. So the papers were in my pocket. The land was behind that gate. And there was smoke coming from the chimney of the house that was supposed to be my house, in a thin straight column that meant someone had a cook fire going, and the morning was young enough that they hadn't let it die down yet. I got off the roan and opened the gate. There were children running in the yard when I came up the drive. 2 boys and a girl, the boys maybe 10 and 7, the girl younger, and they all stopped dead the moment they saw me on horseback coming between the poplars, the way children do when something interrupts the world they're in, and they need a second to decide whether it's dangerous or not. I slowed the roan to a walk. One of the boys took off toward the house. I stopped in the yard, 20 yards out, and waited. There was a dog too, old shepherd mix, didn't bark, just watched me from where it lay in the thin sun beside the porch steps. I always liked dogs that didn't bark at everything. A dog like that's thought it over and decided it knows what matters. The door opened. She came out onto the porch with a shotgun broken open, cradled in her left arm. Not raised, just cradled the way someone carries a tool they know how to use. She was tall, maybe 40, dark hair showing some gray at the temple, wearing an apron over a plain dress. There was flour on her hands. She'd been in the middle of something. She didn't look afraid. That was the thing. A lot of women would have looked afraid, a stranger riding in with that kind of quiet. She just looked at me, the way you look at a problem you're waiting to understand better before you form an opinion. "You're not from Harlan's," she said. "No. The creek come up, or is this something else?" "It's something else." She looked at me another moment. The boy who'd run to the house was standing just behind her, to her left, watching me with both hands in his pockets. "Let me put some coffee on," she said. "You can water your horse." I didn't know what I'd expected, not that. Her name was Nora Vass. She told me that before she even asked mine, which I thought was either confident or deliberate or both. She was a widow. Her husband, Werner Vass, had died 3 years back. Fever. She had the 3 children and about 110 head of cattle and a hired man named Duffy, who she sent home at noon, because she needed him to mend the southeast fence before it got any colder. She'd come to the land in 1899. Her husband had bought it from a man named Cord Elgin, who had told him it was clear. I put my coffee cup down. "Cord Elgin," I said. "You know the name." "I know the name." Cord Elgin had been the reason I left. He was the man who'd taken the land, or tried to. He'd had a paper of his own, forged with names I didn't recognize, claiming my father had sold him the acreage the winter before he died. My father had been sick that winter. I was there for the beginning of it and gone by the end, not by choice, the way I said. Elgin had come after me with men, and I'd killed 2 of them on the road south of Dunmore Creek, and after that I couldn't come back without a rope waiting. Elgin was dead by 1901. I'd heard that from a man in Denver who had no reason to lie about it. Nora Vass was watching me across the kitchen table. "He forged a deed," I said. "From my father's name. Werner didn't know." "I know that now," she said. "I didn't know it then." She paused. "Werner didn't know it then either." "I'm not saying he did." "I know you're not." She turned her coffee cup in both hands. The flour was still on one knuckle. "But I want to say it plain. He believed what Elgin told him. He paid a fair price. He built on it. I've been here 6 years. The fence I mentioned is the 3rd one we've put up on the east pasture. We dug a new well in 1902. Werner died on this land and is buried on the southwest rise." She said that last part without any particular weight on it, just as a fact that needed to be in the room. I looked at the window. Outside, the 2 boys were back to whatever they'd been doing. The girl had found the dog and was sitting against it the way children sit against dogs, completely unself-conscious. "I have the deed," I said. "Original, recorded, my father's then mine." "I believe you," she said. That surprised me. Most people confronted with the same would have argued. Would have told me to prove it, get a lawyer, come back with the county clerk. "Just like that." "No," she said, "not just like that. I've known there was something wrong with how Werner came to this land since the 2nd year. There's a man at the county seat, Holt Brewer, and he was too interested in what we were doing out here. Too interested in who I was writing to after Werner died. The kind of interested that's about keeping something quiet." She paused. "I wrote to a lawyer in Cheyenne last spring. I know what forged looks like now, and I know what Elgin was." "Then you knew someone might come." "I thought someone might come," she said. "I wasn't sure anyone would. 25 years is a long time." The kitchen was warm. The fire in the stove ticked. Outside the window, the boy, the older one, was trying to get the younger one to help him drag something, a fence rail or a log, and the younger one wasn't interested. and the older one had the particular expression of a child who is 6 seconds away from giving up. "I don't know what you want me to say," Nora Vass said. "I can't give you back 25 years. Werner can't answer for what he took, and I don't think he took it knowingly. The children don't know any of this." "I'm not looking to put children out of a house." "I didn't think you were," she looked at me steadily, "but you are looking to come home." It was the first time anyone had used that word in relation to me in a long time, maybe ever. I don't know why it did what it did to something behind my ribs, but it did, and I looked back at the window so she wouldn't see it. "I don't know what I'm looking for," I said, which was honest enough. I didn't leave that day. I told myself I'd stay one night, sleep in the barn, work out a conversation with Brewer at the county seat in the morning. But it rained that afternoon, the kind of rain that comes in sideways off the mountains, and Nora Vass said there was a spare room, and I said I was fine in the barn, and she said don't be an idiot in a tone that didn't leave a lot of room for argument. The spare room smelled like cedar and old wool. There was a quilt on the bed that had been made by someone who knew what they were doing, the stitching close and even, and I lay on top of it in my clothes and listened to the rain and thought about my father's hands and the way he used to walk the fence line in the evening, just checking, the way some men say prayers before bed. I thought about Cord Elgin. I'd spent more years than I should have thinking about Cord Elgin. Not with rage, that had burned out somewhere around 1904, 1905 maybe, with something flatter and more tiring. The kind of thought you keep having not because you want to but because something got interrupted and never got finished, and the brain keeps returning to it the way a tongue keeps finding a missing tooth. He was dead, that was finished. What wasn't finished was the land, the deed, and the 312 acres of it currently occupied by a widow and her children, and a hired man named Duffy who needed to mend the southeast fence. I fell asleep thinking about the southeast fence, whether it was the old woven wire or the barbed. Barbed was what you needed out here, but it was worse for horses. My father always used woven on the south pasture because he kept horses there, and barbed would take the hide off them if they spooked into it, which they did, because horses are idiots in a way that is almost comforting. I didn't know why I was thinking about my father's fences. I knew why I was thinking about my father's fences. Over the next 3 days, I helped with the fence. Not because it was mine to fix, legally, structurally, nothing about that fence was my business. But Duffy was a decent worker and a terrible planner, and I could see from 50 feet away that the way he was stringing the wire was going to give him grief by February. And I said something about it, and he said something back, and we spent an afternoon arguing about wire tension in the cold, which is a specific kind of useful argument that working men have. And by the end of it, the fence was going up the right way, and we both pretended the other one had come around to our position. The older boy's name was Henry. He was 10, and he had his mother's steadiness, not her watchfulness exactly, but the same quality of not reacting too fast, of waiting to see what a thing was before deciding how to feel about it. He started coming out to the fence line in the afternoons, not to help, just to watch, and on the 3rd day he helped, and by the 4th day he was asking me questions about the wire I was glad to answer. The younger boy, Thomas, was 7 and loud and completely uninterested in fencing and very interested in the roan. I let him brush her out one morning and immediately regretted it because he talked the entire time. Questions piled on questions without waiting for answers. And the roan, who had a low tolerance for noise, went sideways twice. But he had good hands with her and calmed down once he got focused, and I watched him find that focus and thought about how some people have it in them, the ability to settle, and how it comes out when they find something worth settling for. The girl was Margit. She was 5. She had said 3 words to me total. In the evenings, Nora and I sat at the kitchen table after the children were in bed and we talked. Not about the land, about other things, about the state of the territory, about what was happening in the East, about a book she'd been reading that I'd never heard of, about the price of cattle, about Werner. She talked about Werner with the matter-of-factness of a woman who has already done the hard part of grief and come out the other side, and there's no pretending about it anymore in either direction. I told her a little about the years in between, not the ugly parts, the other parts, the places I'd seen, the men I'd known, a winter in Nevada that nearly killed me, a spring in New Mexico that was so green it made you feel cheated for not having been born there. She listened the way people listen when they're actually interested, and not just waiting for you to finish. On the fifth night, she said, "Holt Brewer is going to be a problem." "I know. He's been out here twice since Werner died. Both times asking about the deed, whether I'd made copies, whether I had any reason to believe the original was disputed." She paused. "I told him no, which was a lie." "Why'd you lie to him?" She looked at me. "Because I wanted to know who was coming first, before he did anything about it." "I thought about that." "You knew someone was going to come." "I thought it was possible." Werner talked sometimes, after a drink, about how the seller had been in too much of a hurry, about things that didn't add up. She was quiet for a moment. "And there's a name carved in the barn post, about 8 feet up. You'd have to know to look. CD 1893. I hadn't been in the barn. She watched me take that in. "I left it," she said. "I don't know why I left it." Holt Brewer came on the 7th day. He came with another man, younger, who had the look of someone hired for his size, and they came mid-morning when Henry was at the fence line with Duffy and the younger children were inside, and I was in the yard splitting wood, which meant he'd watched the property, which meant he knew someone new was there and had waited until the hands were away. I knew who he was before he said his name. Certain kinds of men have a particular way of riding in, a territorial angle to the shoulder, a way of not making eye contact with anything until they're ready to be looking at exactly what they want to look at, like they own the sight line before they own anything else. "Dunmore," he said. I set the axe down. "Figured you'd come back eventually. Figured it'd be about now, with Elgin's people finally all dead and nobody to tell you to stay away." He had a pleasant voice, which was worse than an unpleasant one. "Wanted to save you a ride to the county seat. Whatever papers you've got, they don't mean anything. The deed on record is the vast deed. That's what stands. The vast deed is recorded on a forgery. That's a serious claim. It's a serious forgery." He smiled, not warmly. "The thing about serious claims is you need serious men to back them, and I'm not sure what serious men you've got after 25 years of not being here." The door of the house opened. Nora came out onto the porch. She was carrying a letter, not the shotgun, and she said, "Mr. Brewer, I've got a letter here from Aldrich Kane in Cheyenne. He's the man I've been corresponding with. He'll be here in 3 weeks, and he's already spoken with the circuit court in Laramie." Brewer's pleasant expression did not change exactly, but something behind it changed. Something recalculated. "I'd like you off my land," Nora said. "Both of you." He looked from her to me and back again. "You're making a mistake," he said, "taking this man's part." "I'm not taking a part," she said. "I'm done having my deed used to cover somebody else's theft, that's all." She folded the letter and put it in her apron pocket. "And I'd like you off my land." The hired man looked at Brewer. Brewer looked at me. I hadn't touched the axe. What happened was this. Brewer looked at me long enough to decide something, and what he decided was that this wasn't the day, and then he turned his horse and left without another word, and the hired man followed, and the sound of their horses went down the drive and out through the gate and then was gone. Nora stayed on the porch until they were out of sight. Then she let out a long breath that she'd been holding. I picked the axe back up and went back to the wood. That night she asked me what I was going to do. Not about Brewer, about the land. About the deed, the county clerk, the months it was going to take the lawyer from Cheyenne to work through it, and what I would do in the meanwhile and where I would go. I don't know, I said. You could stay. I looked at her. I mean it practically, she said, but there was something in the way she said it that wasn't entirely practical. I need the help. Duffy's good, but he's one man. Henry does more than a 10-year-old should have to, and you know this land. I haven't been on this land in 25 years. You knew about the south pasture fence. You knew about the drainage on the East Creek bed before I mentioned it. You knew that the old linta behind the barn was going to need a new roof before next spring. She looked at me. You've been walking it in your head for 25 years. That's what I think. I didn't say anything to that. I'm not asking for a promise, she said. I'm asking if you'll stay through the winter until the lawyer comes. After that you can do what you want. A pause. Although I hope you won't. Nora. I'm not a woman who says things she doesn't mean, she said. You've been here a week and I've watched how you are. With the children, with Duffy, with the land. I've watched how you look at the poplars when you come up the drive and how you look at the south field at dusk when nobody's watching, or thinks nobody's watching. She set her hands flat on the table. This is your home, I know that. And I know I'm the woman living in your house and I can't give you back what you lost. But you're not the man who lost it either. Not entirely. And I'd like to find out what remains. The fire in the stove ticked. Outside the window, the night was clear and very cold, the kind of cold that makes the stars look hard and close. The CD. In the barn, I said. Yes. Why did you leave it? She was quiet for a long moment. Because someone put it there, she said. Someone who belonged here. It seemed like it would be wrong to take it down. I looked at the table. I looked at my hands on the table, which were the hands of a man 50 years old who had done too many rough things with them and not enough right ones. They looked like my father's hands now. I'd been noticing that lately. What do you want? I said, not sharply, just plainly. I want what I just said, she said. You here, working this land, being part of what happens on it. She looked at me without any performance in it. I want the man who carved his name in my barn post to know that somebody kept it. That's all. Whatever else comes from that, we can work out slowly. There's a thing that happens sometimes, late in a life that has been mostly hard and mostly alone, where something you had given up entirely comes back to you. Not the way you remember it, nothing comes back the way you remember it. Differently. Changed and changing and not finished yet. And you can refuse it because it's not what it was, or you can take it for what it is. I've made a lot of bad decisions in my life, mostly through stubbornness and mostly in the direction of holding on to nothing instead of risking something. I'll stay the winter, I said. She nodded like that was settled. Probably the spring too, I said. I thought so. The lawyer came in December, 3 days before Christmas, on a gray morning with snow threatening. His name was Aldrich Kane, and he was thin and careful looking, and he spent 2 hours with my deed and his papers and Nora's letters, and then looked up and said the case was straightforward, which was the first time in 25 years I'd heard anyone use that word in connection with anything I was involved in. There was a hearing in January. Brewer didn't show, which meant he'd found something better to do with himself, or someone had advised him to. The forged deed was voided. The original was upheld. I stood in a cold room with pine floors and a potbelly stove while a circuit judge said my name and a date, and a sum in words that added up to, "The land is yours." Nora was beside me. She'd come for the hearing herself, left Duffy with the children, ridden 40 miles in the cold, and when the judge finished she just nodded, the same way she'd nodded the night I said I'd stay the winter. We rode back mostly in silence, which was comfortable in the way that silences are when you're not working to fill them. It was late afternoon by the time we came up the drive between the poplars. The light was failing and the snow had finally come, light and steady, and it was settling in the pastures and along the fence line and on the lean-to roof that I'd repaired in November. The house had light in the windows. Henry had a fire going. I'd been teaching him to bank it right, to last the night without feeding, and he'd been getting better at it. I stopped my horse at the gate. Nora stopped beside me. The gate, same cedar posts, same iron crossbar. Different chain, new lock, but that was fine. That was changeable. The posts were the same ones my father put in, and the poplars were the same ones he planted, and they were tall now and would be taller. And the land behind them was mine and hers and the children's and Duffy's and the roans and the old shepherd dogs, in the way that land is yours when you've worked it and lost sleep over it and known it long enough to know its moods. She was watching me. I could feel it without looking. I got down off the horse and opened the gate and led the roan through, and Nora rode through behind me, and I latched it again without looking up. When I turned, she dismounted and was standing closer than she usually stood, and she put one hand against the side of my face, cold from the ride, her palm against my jaw, and just held it there. She didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. I put my hand over hers, there in the snow, with the light failing and the house bright behind us and the smell of cedar and cold air, and something that had been gone so long I'd forgotten what to call it. I knew what to call it. We went inside. That was 3 years ago, give or take. The deed is in the house now, in a tin box in the top of the wardrobe, next to Nora's papers, and the children's birth certificates and a letter Werner wrote to Nora from some job he'd had in Colorado in 1895, before they married. I leave that letter where it is. It belongs there. Henry is 13 now. He helps me with the cattle like it's something he decided to do, not something he was asked to, which is the only kind of help that actually counts. Thomas can ride, finally, without terrifying the roan. Margit has started talking quite a bit, which is an adjustment. The southeast fence is good. The south pasture fence is woven wire, same as my father kept it because we run horses there in summer. The lean-to is solid. I put a new hinge on the barn door in September, and for about a week I was the most satisfied I'd been in years, which probably tells you something about what I've become, and I am not complaining about it. My name is carved in the barn post. 8 feet up, 1893, C.D., in the letters of a man who was 22 and didn't know yet what was coming. I leave it there. Seems right. Nora says I should write some of this down. She says it's the kind of thing Henry might want to know one day, or Thomas, or Margit, what this land is and where it came from and what it cost. I've been putting it off because I've never been good at sitting still long enough to write things down. But here I am. The land is 312 acres on the Clearwater Flats. My grandfather broke it out of hard ground in 1848. My father walked the fence line every evening like a prayer. I came back to it at 50 years old, used up and carrying papers in my coat pocket, and found it occupied by a woman who'd left my name in the barn. That woman is asleep upstairs right now, which is where I'm going as soon as I finish this. The fire's banked. The horses are in. There's frost on the inside of the window glass, which means it got colder than I thought and I should have split more wood this afternoon, and I'll do it in the morning. I'm home.